Hey folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about all the books I'm looking forward to in the next 6 months for the latter half of this year. Now, I'm going to be referring to the list I have here on my phone. These dates that I have, they're tentative, they're subject to change, blah blah blah. Some of these books, they don't even have cover reveals as yet. But yeah, without further ado, I'll just dive straight into it. On July 9th, we have Stephen Arion's The Blood Dim Tide. Now, I actually have an arc for this book. I may have already posted a video about it. I did still want to include it here because it is being released on July 9th. And it's just a brilliant follow-up to his Judas Blossom last year. This is the second novel in the Nightingale and Falcon trilogy. And it's just this incredible historical fantasy retelling of the essentially the collapse of Genghis Khan's Mongol Empire. It's just absolutely entertaining. It's even better than the previous book was, and I can't wait to see how he wraps up this trilogy in the final book. Moving on July 16th, my next pick is Jared Petchsek's. I absolutely butchered that last name. I'm so sorry. I have no idea how to pronounce this. Jared Petchsek. Let's call it that. Yeah, The West Passage. Now, this book seems really strange or weird. It looks like it's going to be a very different style of fantasy novel, which is something that I always gravitate to once I spot it. And like I saw it mentioned that this book is going to have illustrations and that sort of stuff. It's going to be a fun book to read, for sure. And it seems to involve the story about this passage and essentially one force that wants to pass through said passage and another force that's guarding it, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty fun ride, at very least a unique ride. So I'm very much looking forward to this, and that's my second pick. Third pick for July, on July 23rd as of today, is from the maestro himself in collaboration with Keanu Reeves. This is China Miéville and Keanu Reeves, The Book of Elsewhere. Now, I have a standing rule with China Miéville. I don't care what it is. I don't care what's happening in it. Once this guy writes it, I read it. And this book is no different. I was made to understand that this is a book set in Keanu Reeves' Berserker Comics world, but China pretty much had the mandate to go ham on it and do whatever he wants to do. So he did whatever he wanted to do. And yeah, this may be my second most anticipated novel of this entire year, second only to a book that will be mentioned later on, because this is his first novel in years, and I've been waiting far too long for this guy to drop something else. Unfortunately, he was dealing with quite a bit of depression, so like many authors, it absolutely had an impact on him, and I'm happy to see that based on the interview that I read, at least he seems to be in a much happier place. He seems to be in a much more, in terms of his mental health, he seems to be in a much more solid place, and that's just absolutely good news for him and fans of his. So I'm excited to see what he gets up to in the Book of Elsewhere. Moving on, we're now in August. On August 6th, I have P. Jelly Clark's The Dead Cattail Assassins. This is a novella that I also was lucky enough to get an arc for, but I did want to highlight it here because this was an absolutely fun novella. At this point, I'm pretty much convinced that Clark he just writes straight up bangers, and this novella is no different. It's all about an undead assassin who accepts a contract to kill someone, and when she goes to do it, she realizes she's been set up, and it's just a mystery to unravel the entire situation behind who set her up, and it was just a fun blast from start to finish. The ending in particular worked absolutely well for me because I'm from the Caribbean, so I just had a ton of fun reading that ending. When you read this, and you absolutely should read this, you'll understand why that's relevant. Moving on August 20th, I have Jonathan Mayberry's The Dragon in Winter, which is the final novel in his Cake and the Dam trilogy. And this is epic fantasy with Lovecraft and horror mixed in. These are just absolutely fun rides. If you're a fan of Mayberry, you absolutely want to pick them up. if you're an epic fantasy fan, this is one of those trilogies you want to get to at some point. It's not high priority. It shouldn't be low priority. It's pretty entertaining. It is super violent. It is super graphic. It's a lot of fun. It is what it is. It's like it didn't blow my mind. It didn't rock my world. It didn't blow my mind, but I've read many books that are far worse. It is what it is. A solid read. Very solid read. The series so far, that is. So I'm absolutely excited to get this final book and conclude this series as it is. Moving on, in September we have Ben Aronovich dropping another novella in the world of the Rivers of London / Peter Grant series, and this is The Masquerades of Spring. This seems to be a novella set in the US again. I didn't pay attention too much to this. I'll read anything that Aronovich writes in the Peter Grant universe. So yeah, that's coming up on September 5th, according to the last date I saw. And then on September 10th, we have R.J. Barker's Warlords of Weirwood, which is the second book in, I guess, his Weirwood trilogy. And the first one I found to be like incredibly gritty, low fantasy. And we were introduced to the eponymous Weirdwood in that book. So given that this book is titled Warlords of Weirwood, I'm very interested to see the direction that it goes in. Once again, this seems to be like it's going to be, unless something changes in this book, it seems like it's going to be a pretty solid epic fantasy. Nothing to write home about, but definitely worth out there. If you're a fan of his, one you want to grab. Moving on, we have on September 24th, we have Anthony Ryan's A Tide of Black Steel, which is the first of a new trilogy from him. I was made to understand that this is actually going to be a sequel series, sort of, to his Covenant trilogy that he wrote recently, and it has like a Norse inspiration to it. I don't have the best track record with Norse inspired stories, but at the same time, this is Anthony Ryan we're talking about. This guy writes bangers, so I do very much want to pick this up and read it. I sincerely hope it works for me, but either way, I expect it's going to be a pretty solid epic fantasy novel. And then also on September 24th, we have Rick Riordan's Wrath of the Triple Goddess, which is the second of, I think, three additional planned Percy Jackson novels. So if you're a fan of that series, I guess you want to check these out. This sub-series kind of seems to be all about Percy trying to get into college and needing 3 divine letters of recommendation, essentially. And in the first book, he got his first recommendation. This one, he's going after another one. I didn't pay too much attention to what this adventure is about. I'm reading this mainly for the nostalgia factor and because I have a cousin who will bully me if I don't read it with her. So there's that. But yeah, moving on, in October, we have, on October 8th, Sungil Kim's Blood of the Old Kings. I actually had an arc for this one, and it's just this really fun epic fantasy inspired by like the 80s sword and sorcery fantasy. So it is written different from what you would expect a modern epic fantasy to be written. It's done pretty well. And of course it's written by a non-Westerner, so like it brings like a slightly different perspective to the table in terms of some of the choices that you make, in terms of some of the creativity that we see on hand. And then in addition to all of that, like it's short, it's fast-paced, it's fun, like those novels from the 80s are. It's very much epic fantasy, but it doesn't suffer from the bloat that modern epic fantasy does. Like, it does what it has to do, it does it very effectively, it does it very efficiently. A pretty fun read. I think this is the start of a series, but so far I've only found mention of this first book, so hopefully there's more to come. Either way, this book reads very much as a standalone with a pretty big cliffhanger at the end. And more cliffhanger in terms of one particular character than anything really. I hope there's more to come. Either way, pretty fun intro. And then on October 15th, we have probably my third most anticipated novel of this year, and that is Benedict Jackson's Instruction of Shadow. Now, his his Stephen Oakwood novel last year, An Inheritance of Magic. It was my book of 2023. It absolutely blew my mind. Benedict Jackal just writes incredible urban fantasy, and this series with that intro that we had last year is absolutely going to be a heavy hit in the genre as it unfolds. So I have very high expectations for this book, and I absolutely know Jack is going to meet them, because this guy writes top-notch stuff. Like I had a blast of a time with his Alex Vera series, and I fully expect that Stephen Oakwood is going to outdo that series. So yeah, like I said, third most anticipated novel of this year. Moving on, we have Jeff Vandermeer's Absolution, which is the fourth novel that's going to be part of his Southern Reach books, is his Area X books. So Annihilation and those others. I don't know too much about this book, mainly because I got an arc for it and I want to go in it as blind as possible to see what it's about. But yeah, it's the fourth in that series. How connected it is to the events of the previous three remains to be seen. But it's the fourth of a series. Pretty much only pick this up if you're a fan of the series, I would think. But yeah, before I even touch that arc, I want to reread this trilogy, so I'm going in pretty fresh on what's going on. Let's see what happens. And then also on October 22nd, we have Susanna Clarke's The Wood at Midwinter, which is essentially a short story being published in a hardcover edition with illustrations and that kind of thing. Interestingly enough, this seems to be essentially the prose version of an audio short that she did for BBC a little while back, and you can actually find that short to listen to online, and it's like 15 minutes long. It's a pretty interesting story in 100% pure Susanna Clarke fairy tale style. And like, I listened to it already. I'm not sure I'm going to pick up this book. I'm not sure if it is indeed the same story of it, or if it's been expanded, or if it's just, or if we're going to have a book where like we have huge font and illustrations to kind of make up a page count. But yeah, if you're a fan of like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, this book is set in that universe, so it is one to read. Anyway, moving on November 1st, we have The Lotus Empire, which is the final book of Tasha Suri's current trilogy, and it's going to bring this entire conflict to a head, naturally. This has been a pretty fun, like, Indian inspired epic fantasy to read, with like a plant-based magic system and all of that. Pretty fun. I'm excited to see how she wraps this all up, and I'll be there for that. On November 12th, we have Todd Williams' The Navigator's Children, which I believe is the final book of the Austenard series. I actually recently finished reading the Memory, Sorrow and Thorn trilogy, and I do want to catch up with the Last King of Austenard series before the release of this book, to kind of join in on that little train ride. Todd Williams is an absolutely incredible writer. The world that he's created, it's just rich and lush and engaging and just a joy to be in. But this is very much classic epic fantasy. Like, it's dense, it's over bloated, you name it. Unless you go, I believe as a modern reader, unless you go into this with your eyes wide open, you're probably gonna bounce hard off of it. But yeah, like, I'm there for that, I guess. And then in December, I really only have two picks. One of those is on December 5th, Adrian Tchaikovsky's Days of Shattered Faith, which is the final novel in his Tyrant Philosophers trilogy. And as with the previous two books, it follows like the Palestine Empire moving off to conquer a whole new setting. So I wonder what he has in store for us here. I had an absolute blast at House of Open Wounds. It's actually one of my top books of 2024. So I'm excited to see how the story wraps up in this one. And then, as pretty much every epic fantasy fan out there, my number one most anticipated novel of this year, Stormlight 5, December 6th, the ending of the first arc of the Stormlight Archive. And let's see how the conflict between Dalinar and Odium comes to a close, or a stalemate, or however it's going to end. Either way, I expect this is going to be pretty epic. I saw somewhere that this book is weighing in at almost 500,000 words. It's going to be it's going to be the biggest book of the Stormlight Archive, and I'm going to be there for every page of it. I have days off booked and everything. Like, I'm just going to have a blast with this book, regardless of what. And I am going to have to reread it multiple times to absorb everything. But yeah, like, that's my #1 most anticipated book of this year. So this is pretty much my list of everything I'm looking forward to this year. I'm sure there's tons of other great releases coming out that I'm not aware of. As things crop up, and I find out about them, I'll probably read them, which is why I have a different list like I do each quarter, where I talk about the best books I've read of each quarter. I do those lists specifically because there's absolutely no way I'll find every book that's getting released, and someone will recommend something that I'll decide to try and love. That a month ago, a week ago, a few days ago, I had never even heard of. So check those out if you're curious to see what are my favorite books quarter by quarter. And yeah, favorite new releases quarter by quarter, I should say. And yeah, these are the books I'm looking forward to this year. If there's any not included here, feel free to drop a comment letting us know about them, letting me know about them. There may be something exciting in there I haven't even heard about that's been released yet. And yeah, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.